Going live. Good morning, Ginla. Tashi delay. And good morning, Katrina. Thank you for your interpretations today. Just a couple of notes before we start. In October, we're going to be hosting Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe here at Sravasti Abbey. He's going to be teaching on Je Tsongkhapa's prayer to be reborn in the land of bliss. And that's October 23 through 30. So it's a nice long teaching if you'd like to make plans to join us. Or if you'd like to help sponsor Geshe-la's air tickets for these teachings, you can go to our donate page on the website and let us know how you'd like to designate the donation for the airfare. Okay, so we'll begin with some prayers this morning. To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, witness God, both destroyer, completing and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God that bliss, nor of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. One O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme science, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the foe of fault, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, for land, sun, and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this your venerable holy gurus. In the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient being. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, that is.
Decent.
Got it, awesome. Oh yeah, they are children go back to the soon later. She didn't do make it, then make it. Whereas the Thomas she quit on you. Don't think it's so your mother. You must say to work what they get. She now go with it to the Gemara. She didn't do make it, then make it. She trying to go at him. Luda some ye Kagachi, some the Tomatomos say, huh? Go at your long order. Oh, did you all answer the Sang Head of Chiniora? Niandos going about Tunga Mabunyong Gonge. Run there to Lula Soba Kanga Tunga Mabunyong Gonge Rixiora. Not the Zulu thought to travel hard and millers of what is all the tendrose. The one at the only archie, the Lutan Chicken Mount Yonge. The Chiniora. So going in Badal drew trade on some bull do the so thank you, Squara. So look here, Squara. Oh, yeah. Going in Badre, Kuma Butsitilia, Gawi. Give a Toma me when the Sasha way. Nesoli Kichi, Mambusile Shakbache, Tagbayeta, Ra. Metsendile Mambusame. Chigalamu, Kesam Lutanchetipa, Drotungish Chayu, Tine Tangasoli Gigmara, Dental Chigra, Mikiwa Chudi, Soe Ruskiva, Mikiwa Chudipa, Tindo Jogi Ruskiva, Chu, so Joba, so Jebapa, so Joba. Oh, today the awards are, and it can use your Dana the Messamsa. Oh, the Manata send it with the Dalgo. And the tit penjo of today, you had to Dalia, Tikbayata Josana. Jamala Drosadi to Widow Mandruis in Drosa tradition as the child. Madre the touch of Insam Madre to many Haiti. What is on that? She never make it 10 messages. 10 years ago, this order. Take on this order. They keep Kunjosum to Yeshe. Jibala Jum get the Kunjosum to Yeshe. What is it?
So here, as for what to begin with, as the great master Gelama Tsongkhapa has said, there is no certainty that after death we may not be born in the lower realms. So here, after we die, when we die, our body and our mind separate. So the continuum of our mind will go on, but we have to cast aside this body. And we aren't taught about death and having to face death in order to scare us, but this is the way that things are. We can establish this with direct perception. And so here, when it comes to where we will be born after we die, this is something where there are basically two options. We can be born in the lower realms. We might go to a place where there's a greater amount of suffering, the hell realms, hungry ghosts and animals, or we could be born as a human or a god that, although is still in the nature of suffering, the kind of abject suffering is less. And so here we have no certainty, really. I mean, it is the case that we need to have confidence by actually addressing the sort of causes that would lead us to be born in the lower realms, trying to stop or avert those causes that would lead to such a rebirth, and take the time to purify, to confess and purify those kinds of negativities that we have done in the past that could lead to such a result. And so too, at the time of death, if we are able to cultivate a virtuous mind, then really we can die without any kind of trepidation. We face that death having certainty that yes, we will go to a good realm. We will go to a good rebirth. If instead we do many non-virtuous things sort of to get wealth in just this life, we're basically making the plans for ourselves to go straight to the lower realms. We can guarantee that we will be born in those lower realms. And so here where it says that continues in this verse saying the protection from such terror lies in the three jewels alone. So we must make firm the practice of going for refuge. So here our real refuge is in the three jewels, and in particular the activities that we ourselves engage in during the course of this life.
Oh yeah, Bisa. Oh, the Kunjosum to Yeshe. 다 직접 좀 견디 소리스는 군조 좀 되세라. 컨디스 좀 그랬으나 최대 바보. 뭐 내손에 계시 존디레 땡에 하고 그여 신기여 냠요여 땡들에 계시 존디레스 송겐게 송바보 람땡게데 산제 좀 된데 더라 산제 탐제를 시다 단단한 좀 전부리 되려 산제 좀 된데 페네 뒤템발에 숙바선도 산제 좀 된데 더보 겹tem 바보데 내손게 동엘에 겹에 겹땡기어래 와 코에 동엘에 겹에 겹땡기어래 또 바보들이 강가 킹게데 어 진행이 돼 대지 교군조스는 내 최대를 겹ngöde 겹ngöde 가르스는 사지성배 최대 기부 중으로지네 미개와 주디빵 대도저 개와 주디 주에들에 남주 메시지에 지소나 두디사 디딜레고여다 땡가라저 강가 통주식이래 가라게 통주식이래 상마 그가라 상마 대만리라 가르스는 가시했던 데서도 네 꿈을 꿰쳐고 말해 디데 팀나를 요데 티쳐게 말해 레라부레 삼기도 와 레라부 얘나 고디 데부디 레라부 요 말해 데부디 야부디 레 야부 심부 요라 디인데 소체 바세 소체에 따바 소체 말다 파마 세그메스 소체 방게스 가게스다 세그마라 심지어 컨디션에 디가 세그메스 고요라 무슨 이나다 라루 이나다 가레 이나다 칠루 메다 이나다 가레 이나 세그메스 고요마듯이 파마 세그메스 세그메스 레라부디 마라 제가 소체 방고 삼 술랭에 소체그메스 교가만에 마부 소체 이제 때만데레 삼상이 탁번에 삼거라 소체 반에 와 마심발레 바스데 니바데 삼르타데 메미 노르 소솔 왕자 메바 계급 기찰라 로아 소솔 왕자 메바 미션다 잘라 때 티체체 왕자 메네 페슈체 어디 때만데레 삼거라 로아 마심발레 바스 소소 잘라 여바 파 밀펜 돈에 침바땅거라 침바땅에 메네 셴지 침바땅알이야 제수이란 전에 뒤에 고치어라 언제가 거든지 나랑래 텐데 벤조시 예배 있네 게티 침바땅서레 삼사 예배 얘네 삼 동생 배나 디기와라 시지 메지 소소 쪽 얘네 침바 땅에 매버 텐데 게래요 말아 상생기 침바 최지 침바 미직배 침바세 무슨 얘기 시도 전에 내가 제도 마부제도 침벌이야 뒤에 가서라 신내가 대지도 건조성도 그래서 산지 좀 되게 대송도 미개와 주체 트라마 직접 낙절도 소치바 마심발레 발로임 세라 납심 록다세티 독초 주요라 티페게 첨부를 알아서려 먼저 정말 개침부터 말해 고티에서 어디지 다시한다 서바다 가시와다 고마도 쉐슈르 또 가서라 티 산제 좀 된데 캡틴 바보 메게와 주디 빵디 도저 개와 주디 투스 티트나 아니 계란 예손르게 주디 까기요레스 다이나 쳔델레 티마제나 교가마 사샤 마부요레 뜻을 샥바치스 대제든달레 차체 그 틴데 가르치고네 돌로 발라소바 틴데체네 틱바 다예가 섬나타세 틱바 컨데 사이네 다예요레스 틱바 연데고 샹나 다예요라 틱바 샤산 샤나 다예 메나니 제케요 마라 냥주라 틱바 샤야 다예요라 어디제나 근데 최대로 사제서 temngöde 데레다 tem경원에 데레 어디가 저 아고고도 temngöde 최대로 에세레 기부 주무대 볼 전에 어디래다 되질라나.
So here it says the protection from such terror, such as being born in the lower realms, lies in the three jewels alone. So what is it that can protect us from this fear is really the three jewels, in particular, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. The Buddha is the teacher, the one who says to us, well, if you do non-virtuous actions, you're going to go to the lower realms. If you do virtuous actions, you will be born in the upper realms. Teaches us unmistakably based upon his omniscience, knowing all, And we often talk about the Buddha that we have come under, Buddha Shakyamuni, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, but this is really all Buddhas who are the teachers of refuge. They teach us based upon their own direct knowledge what it is that we should avoid and what it is that we should engage in order to avoid rebirth in the lower realms. And the actual refuge then is the Dharma. And really, when we think about the Dharma, particularly for the being of small scope, this is in our everyday lives, avoiding the 10 non-virtues and engaging in virtuous actions. Now, we all, myself included, tend to sort of disregard this, see this as something that is like a small practice. We think like, oh yeah, of course. I mean, you don't steal because if you steal, you're going to go to jail and stuff like that. So I don't do those actions. But really, it's not just about that, not just about those kinds of egregious actions, but really thinking about our everyday actions and how it is that we are according with the practice of avoiding the 10 non-virtues and engaging in virtuous actions. So when we think about something like not killing, it's not just like, oh, well, I'm not killing my mother and my father, and I'm not going around murdering people, so I'm not killing, but really thinking about every single life form, all the way down to bugs, and making sure that you don't kill those beings, things like goats and sheep and so forth. We should be avoiding killing at every level. And we should also recognize that in our past lives, we have undoubtedly engaged in a lot of activities of killing, or something like stealing. We think maybe, oh, I'm not actively taking the things of others, but we really should be cautious with respect to what we are using and how we are making use of, say, things that belong to a country or belong to other people. And so here, when we think about these actions of the 10 non-virtues and engaging in their opposites, the 10 virtues, like say, as opposed to stealing, we should engage in generosity. Even if, say, I mean, if we have material wealth, we can give that, but there are many other forms of generosity. We can rejoice in the generous actions of others. We can be generous with the Dharma. We can be generous in the sense of protecting the lives of others, giving protection from fear, like when a bug is about to die or something like that. And so here, doing the 10 virtuous actions, which are the opposite of the 10 non-virtues of engaging in killing and stealing and sexual misconduct and lying and harsh speech, divisive speech, gossip, maliciousness, covetousness, and wrong view, we shouldn't see these as small. I mean, a lot of us think like, oh yeah, that's very basic. I want to do the things that are more profound, that are higher up, that are more extensive. But really, these are the kinds of actions that we need to hold to in our day-to-day life. We need to engage in virtuous actions, avoid non-virtuous actions, and recognizing that we have created many non-virtues in the past, we should engage in a practice of purification, doing things like prostrations or reading sutras, recognizing that the one quality of non-virtues, of negativities, is that they can be purified. So through our actions, we have the ability to purify them. So the practice of the Dharma is our real source of refuge. Our own practice, our own actions are what is able to protect us in our future lives.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, they do got so that. So you buy it and much in Balemba buy it. Lumbe Timere, who miss a show mother. Jala me, Jala Kusho mother, Jacob Jala, Madaba the Sosa Tawache show mother to the Signora. Inako, Sujaga Hamago Timler, Dromegona, Pulisiga Hamagona, Jala Jirana, O Kina, Ojis, Suja Hako, some kigre. Oh, Miss that she best say what you know, Suji Hako, some other, some gun rogocha, some other, some say something with it. Did him be in a cotilli shane cigarra? Shoot it in the matter, project and new some cigarra. Oh, Majimbalena, a soch and a pit in the new day, some call it, can you take it, some good. Oh, Kumakuna, call the new day, some call it to me, and good, call Jalalanasere. Did temper, take a do in at in this some little yana. Sepe todo birds you ever miss such a man, such a hako, kuga mab, such a hakona, the kick mare. Or the soon as a passion that they talk with the tegre. The man and Tim give some time or thought to the Nadam do some kigre. Or the cavalier, Shala Teve, Shala never chigre, never Shala to me take the digmaris and Seve couldn't lunch go at it. The temper, take a do in a tegre. Or the kangal make a so much better, teach you love now.
So here, abandoning things like killing and stealing, maybe there are those who think like, well, yeah, I don't kill, I don't steal because that's against the law. If I get caught, I would be put in jail. But then that really isn't a stable kind of abandonment of those negativities, because maybe it's like, oh, well, no one's going to notice if I take this thing. I'm not going to get caught by the law, so that's okay, I can take it. Or we might think like, oh, well, if I could kill this person without getting caught by the law, if I could just get away with it, then that would be okay. I mean, that's really not a stable practice here, to really think like this is not okay because it creates suffering for another. If I take someone's life or if I take their possessions, it is going to create harm and suffering for them. And so therefore, that's why I'm not going to do that. That is an actual stable practice of this. If instead we're thinking like, well, if I could do it without getting caught by the law, then that would be okay. That really wouldn't be harming anyone. That's not a proper sort of practice. If we have this sense that, well, by doing these kinds of actions, I'm creating suffering and harm for others, and out of a motivation of love, not wanting to create harm toward other sentient beings, that's when our practice really becomes stable, not just because we think we might get caught by some sort of authority.
뭐야? 다 됐나 시 기분 된게 쳐야 내려와. 애네 다 차당 봐야 되라 녀모 봐야 돼. 나 섬소스 개심 붙이. 애네 소소다 테마 테마 지디마데 중순하네 메레 콘도체 로와. 신자게 왕기 디마서 그때 치기 삼제 콘도사로 차당으로 와. 차당이 용해데 가려 용거래 나 섬상가지 슈침부에서 나 삼반의 시점에서 나에 들려서 나 주들세 삼려 용거라. 어디 방구여라. 산제 좀 되게 코알에 탈고 나 하다 밀리겠나야. 예선을 때도 야보래대 얘나 들에 동해지랑 실제를 섬겨라. 레다 녀무베 시와도 주네 겨와질 랑그 신제들 풍부 돌레셔로 풍부 사발랑고 되는 나의 여러 제 여러 강가 여러 봐. 뭐인데 아니 풍부 깨가 레다 녀무봉 그 라메바 끼치 제거 같은데 동해 형주 다 쳐사라. 템부게 마로와. 티엔데 고 레다 녀무베 와게 풍부 돌레셔 봐. 동해 때는 녀무고 봐. 와 동해에 땐도 타러 tendeje tuku samna tharba se terwa tungele tendu tharba chi tuku yona kibu ding yena ti samna kurge yona o ti ta chagda da tongbanyi se tami se tu komgo doa o tami komtuna ya bore tami samma tuna kondo nga je chato jensim yu tongju tezu nyamo mabu doa tezu wange ni lesa ne kwa je kyusa yora o ti chodirwa sanje o tezu kira kwa la ke manduna 아니 차당하게 왕게 너무 도성게 왕게 레 기디 사이에 참치하고 레서 송거라 차당하게 왕게 레게 착배 왕게 레 개와서나야 돼 하다 밀리게 지 둘러두고 와라 다 건드 왕게들 레게 와서야 계시 말이나 신다 왕게니 차당 왕게 미게 레서서는 계속 계시 둘러두고 와라 어디인데 그 너무 방고라 너무 봐야 돼 대처를 최고조 뒤에 대처고래 송거라 디치 군조들에 때문에도 되래. 공도 초로당 예 초로당 차도 초로당 드레스 초로당 로 아니 나 삼사 소소마도 섬기면게 나 라완도 시비치 연나샤 되게도 망고래 뉴르당 고래 아니 타바토 그래서 디왕게 레서 말와 자 뒷경문에도 되래다 아주 경병원에도 되래 경문에도 소소시에는 소소티다가 요래 소소 마제나니까 요마라 다라 칸네셔드네 nga즈나시 용해 요마라 야 뒤질라나
So here, like that, the kind of practice of a being of middling scope goes to another level wherein we see that, well, due to attachment and hatred that arise from this sense of grasping at an I, like as though there were this autonomous kind of an I. And when we have then that sort of grasping at an I and all of the various afflictions that follow after that, well, then we continue to take rebirth within samsara. And And so here, although compared to the lower realms, a birth in the upper realms is less suffering, it's still, because of the fact that you have taken up those aggregates due to karma and the afflictions, it is still something that is subject to suffering. You're going to have to age and die and get sick and so forth. And so recognizing that the process of taking up these aggregates due to karma and the afflictions is really within the nature of suffering, a being of middling scope contemplates how, well, I want to have a definite freedom from this. Even if I'm born in the upper realms, that's still in the nature of suffering. And so instead, I want to get out of this entirely, definitely attain freedom from that cycle of suffering. And so if I need this kind of freedom from that cycle of suffering, then I need to eliminate those kinds of afflictive emotions, and particularly that sense of an I that grasps at I and then mine and my side. And due to the force of that, all of these other afflictions, attachment and hatred and pride and jealousy and deceptiveness and contempt and so forth, arise. And so if we don't want to be born within samsara, we need to eliminate the causes for that. In this case, those being the kinds of afflictive emotions that are driven by our grasping at an I. And so here, although it is the case that sometimes out of our afflictions, like our attachment, for example, we are able to create the causes to be born in the upper realms, something like anger is never going to lead to us engaging in positive actions that will lead to a good result. But by reducing, by eliminating all of these various afflictions, our grasping, our attachment, our hatred, our animosity, our sort of jealousy and competitiveness and pride, that is the real protection. That is the Dharma acting as protections. By reducing and eliminating all of our afflictive emotions, we then are able to gain a kind of freedom from that. So here, if it's just words, that's not a kind of protection, but really this involves working with our minds, actually implementing and using the Dharma in order to reduce and eliminate our afflictions.
Oh yeah. That the branch butungele tarban do some maimba. Oh, so chebuche tire samluta sende pame chumbe rangi pugu putu sasang ina ta nibu rawa ane kache nyendele sobo yena tetule samlu che ma da che so chebu ta na rigu samna rigu me do asam so koala korne tunga nyamba na shin tetu pe ma ba na ta me ba nyange re asam tetu che de robo che tunge che ko sa re sam ge ora ting de so chebu member che dagbe shen che be cha ju sim so nga sim che tham je ge pama de chen de chebu ma re te ke wa nga ma te ke wa nga ma te ke wa nga ma dandoli ke na de meli ke na de pama de nyen nyen de ka bu nye bu ma bu yong gu ra o te pe ne ke wa nga ma de ching ra mi de chi ke na 교황함에 밤부터도 모신기와 말마도 모신 것에 temperature나 단다 랑게 튀도 가지고 콘도사서 실리 중부에 김지도 가지고 되려나 콘도사기라 다단 밤망원에 이바하거나 어섬드네 가오용그라 니메디들이 섬티드 텐데처럼 단단 텐데 샤샤섬 단이 텐데스 내대와라 소소 하마고네 기집애는 뭐 마신 범아도 상말 심지어 내가 텐션 붙여야 네 텐션 붙여야 말세요 말 그래서 겨울 도마매라 어디 인데 텐데서는 다 천대 치고 파마 년들 삼루탄에 렘도 아섬 땡아마 텐데 삼루탄에 심지어 삼제 라리아 저요 개짱 디 저요 말스 파 도르고야 여월 도르사지 찌에면도 아섬 상말이야 되니 가르소래 쇼럽지 뉴뉴질이야 나조세 마치비제 대완들의 동네 메데베 심베 참말 로제 고살응에 참말 로제 통게 텐데치 차고도 상네 아니 딱베 셴지베 장주 심베체 아니 짐버 추든 서버 삼데 파르 짐버 투르 롬네 로아 아니 동번이 동베 시럽다 다기 기분 드링다 기분 충을이 여버 강가데 거라 동번이 동베 시럽데 오 텐데기 딱베 셴지베 장주 심베 심베 거네 오 대체나니 기분 심베 쳐데레도아 산지지 고바 토고요나 호텔을 놓고 그랬음고도 야
So, but just wanting your own freedom from suffering alone, that's not sufficient. But thinking of those beings who have shown us great kindness, like our mother and father in this life, our friends, our family, those that are dear and that we love very much. When we think about the fact that we have taken countless rebirths in the past, we can recognize that every single being has shown us great kindness in previous lives, whether we were born as an animal or as a human and so forth. We had those who cared for us with great kindness, who were like the mother and father of this life. And wherever we were born, we had those kinds of connections and relationships. But other than having changed lives, other than having moved to a new life and no longer recognizing those beings who, say, acted as your mother and father in a previous life, I mean, it could be that someone that you don't like, your neighbor or someone in your proximity, is actually someone that was your dear mother in a previous life. It's just that you don't recognize them. If you could recognize and see that, then you would really take the kind of view that they deserve to have happiness and would want to do something to benefit them. And so here, even if we don't recognize those other sentient beings because of the fact that we have shifted lives and come into new relationships, we can't cast anyone aside saying like, oh, they didn't show me kindness. We have connections with all of these sentient beings. And really, we can also recognize that every single sentient being is the same in wanting to have happiness and wanting to be free from suffering, and thereby training our mind and recognizing all as having acted with great kindness towards us and equalizing and exchanging self and other. We then go to train in the various six perfections, generosity and so forth. But this kind of practice of the being of great scope is dependent upon those practices of the beings of small and middling scope. That is the kind of foundation on the basis of which one then develops this attitude of bodhicitta, striving in the various practices that include those kinds of ethics of the being of small scope, the realization of emptiness and selflessness of the being of middling scope, as well as that attitude of bodhicitta of the being of great scope. Oh yeah, again.
Oh yeah, they you shine do so yeah,
Disong.
do so. Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. 신행에 rummeji temeji te jikub kunjo sumdu ngesara jikwa kyomgen ta kunjo sumdu ngeberese kunjo sumgi kyogresara ta kyobdan de shegura sanje chomden de tabu kyabten babo kanga khenge labche tembabo dirwa labche tembe chane kyogdwa de tipan de tub cheche langdor de ne de labgidwa ma tengdwa o ti kyabten babo de tiptaya mato shanda ke ti kanka sanje ke meba su te su che yo mara ti yo na tamje meba su gura o che de sanje chumden de su gudwa sibe sungu che lam nge ni kecha nam la tense sibe koa ke tunge che ke ti sangma gyu ti sangma nge shingi yo ti sangma chuzul ten yo da se sibe sungu che lam nge ni kecha nam tishin shikwa tenpa de sanje ke gende nangye yoba de 가르스네 럽zet도에들 등에 야부 신기요 냠요요 탈심be 신기요 딘딘데레 레샤 생게 랭게데 데레다 송고라 디신식베 랭게데 덤바보데레 럽zet자야데레 데마시 티치세데 디신식바 덤바데 당원에데 결혼주 제거르다 소소 미케와초 바케와초 투 다음에 받아 차단 일인 차단으로서 봐 심지어 탐절에 개발해봐 잠바서 kum로 차네 계란주 소수 제를 마도시게 강강에 연대 여버도 강가 천줄 때셔 락베 때셔 다 지게질 버셔야 되는데 요 말다스 소소소소 마음바 그 디도데 소소소 레상에 그 제고레스 소소 제고레 다 송고도 자 상제게 좁당한테 람tem바부 차네래 암지대지나 그 멤베츠더라 그 나자나 동네 신나 첨부 주나 나자들 다에게 캡디카레스 캡틴 바보 암지되고 어다 캐라 나자들다 데마진 되지 맨디 소슬랍그라 그 티레 마도 텔라지 제지시다 오마라 로테차 또 뒤선다 가서 캡틴 바보데 산제체 디션에 산제게 캡이 됐는데 캡고도 캡틴 베차네 Chuti Kamone de Dangone de Kare Susu Cheguade. Mikua Chupon, Kiwa Chutu, Tangzi Pong, Rawa Chagdan Pong, Sipong said Susu Cheguade de Toa. Thabkhe Shenji Be Chanju Sam Susu Comguade de Toa. Chuti Kamode. Kamone Kamgade Mena Shidira, Namjukan the Mel Chan Sungutua. Never the night she went Jibadilico, Targo Yuna Nega, the mess or a mess and Amjitic Lavana, she mess and any try royora. Oh, it is. That can do said, kept to be a robot, never a genital sign of Megalia, Tato Chicken nurses, Neodua. All this to all this, I would that in this Joma did it and didn't say, Kanga Kuyora. Oh, teachers are called Kitty, a conjugate to go Rockwater, Sigora. Kinduse, Chidachene, Kindu, Pagwe Kansa Yungura, Tongbani Musum to Tosan Mado, Pagwe Kansa, Kikubuare, Roa. Tainangara to Sangmalia, Dela de Yeshe Mado, Pagwe Kansa, Pet in the Shia Kabura, Tinduta, Tandanga to Dushi Shade. And this was a lamb to be rock watching. Oh, Tezulia, Kidus, Chopachikora, Lamtambachi, Lamgachi, Tinan Dronge, Chisochikora, Telekindusigore, Chopachi. Iji Meji rubbed to join Yegumare. That is a medutanda rubbed to join Shid of Shine Kidus, Mazuki, Kindusilia, Kogiora, Tatelia, Kindushi, Sobine, Kindu. Oh, Tidimadoti, Rabdu Chua, Tanja Yegumara, Pagwe Kansala, Rabdu Chua Yore, Kimba Yora. Oh, Tinikibu Chumi, Lam Tungele, Kanga Rabdu Chuma, Kiba Peme Kanga Yora, Kibu Dingdele, Sangma Yungura, Kibu Chimbe Lam Tura de la Sangma Yungura. Oh, Ti Indico, Telekindukunjo said, Robache, Kamiyada said. Condesigo, Kondo, oh, Tidibati Chogro, oh, the Chogma, that ended the Chegurse, Chigi Robaching Getelia. Chopachikora, Telesigora, Tamandasia, order.
So here, as it says, there is no certainty that after death we may not be born in the lower realms, and the protection from such terror lies in the three jewels alone. The ones that can protect us here are the three jewels, beginning with the Buddha, who is the one who teaches, who gives us advice about what it is that we should adopt and what it is that we should abandon. And again, it is the Buddha that gives this advice about how we go about avoiding the lower realms, how we go about getting out of samsara entirely, how we go about attaining that state of Buddhahood. But it isn't as though the Buddha can do this for us, but rather, as the Buddha himself has said, I teach you all the path that exhausts the miseries of samsara, and that's my responsibility. But it is on you to actually take that path into practice. So here, it is the case that the Buddha gives us this kind of instruction about what it is that we should do in terms of getting rid of our afflictions, or how do we engage in the practice of equalizing and exchanging self and others. But you, the practitioner, have to actually do that. I mean, the Buddha is likened to a doctor, like a physician, in that the physician can diagnose, okay, well, this is what your illness is, and this is what you need to do in order to be able to be cured of this disease. But you, the patient, have to actually do that. So as this says, the Buddha is the one who teaches the path that exhausts the miseries of samsara. He knows the path based upon his own experience, but it is up to us to actually implement that kind of a path. And the Dharma is then referred to as the real refuge, as in it is through the practice of that we are able to avoid a rebirth in the lower realms, that we are able to eliminate attachment and hatred, and by realizing emptiness, get out of samsara, and that we are able to become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of others. And so here, the real refuge, like medicine, is what we do ourselves in order to protect ourselves. So if we need protection from fear, from the fear of the suffering of the lower realms, or from the fear of samsara in general, we need to rely on the refuge of the Dharma, as in taking up these advice from the Buddha into practice. And the Sangha is likened to the sort of nurses, the helpers who aid us in our path to recovery. And so usually they are those who have experience, right, based upon their own experience. And generally, when we talk about the Sangha, we are speaking of those who have had a direct realization of emptiness, who are superiors or Aryas. And it's, difficult that all Sangha may be Aryas, but they can include those who are ordained as well as those who are not ordained. There can be householders who have realized emptiness as well. And it is the case that we need this kind of community. We need a group, a sort of society, and it doesn't need to be necessarily of all those who have taken ordination. Again, it can be householders and those who are ordained as well. But to have someone to look up to look to in terms of how do we go about practicing, someone that we can emulate because they have experience along the path, this is the jewel of the Sangha.
Oh yeah, kunit bakar. Oh de ta kindu kunju set teach yana yongdo. Kindu set de tanda chita tagi shetarwa. Ni pabe kansa rabdu chunga tezo. Ani shiza kindu chucha ngan debatila. Kindu singa du sura namji. Pabe kindu se. Titi ta zo de chue chinge zo. Metse koran de chue utandalia teba che samba che kumdi che chitenge sonda. Chue chinge zo sonda ta tele kindu se che. Nanjungunji chi wara. Chitan pabe kansa te yungmara rabdu chunga dhamma chunga da sangma yuwara. Di chane labdi wara. O ti indi kashe iti saydo atinsan. Mo sanje le kyabsu chiwa tata re. Cho le kyabsu chiwa tata. Kindin le kyabsu chiwa sayate digmido say mabu yuwata. Kindu sayade. Samle rabdu chunga tsuli kindu say konzo shibuchi yinsi che. Shenda tu ke mari say sundu si sorkuduwa. O ti mari ta. Kindu mena rawa. Kindu le pagwe kansa kimbata kanga yuwa chora. Chitan kanga yuwa ra. Ti chane koti, doye chane koti shagi wara, tsohra chimi chizo na chagba yongzali tindiri chagba ra. O tiri mato, ti kyanja kintu yisigi wa marwa. Ki doye nal chana o ti pe, kewa manga chumge tili kushab chigira, kelondaba china kama chik, chocho chi ngeli chuba yina, ko tedi sa pangche ko tamaliya shagura, kembade. Laba kembade pe keshimbu chigira. Karisa ku kewa manga sa yore sigwara. Ko tashi imbe chane kyo tsa chimbure sige wa ma re. Ko kewa maa sa yo re se. Te sonza nganzo kewa sangen ki chizo de ko ya kewa maa sangen tili maa chidon che shabe kechire ma to chige. Ti ma do mewa kindu suli kunzu chanja imbo ti ma re da. O ti kindu kunzu mewa re se o. Ti senge mambu yongdo wa. Ti mena ane kare se ne sanje yo re se. Kunde dozo sanje chapcha kyapsu chisla. Che yore si che budita o tuzule kyaf chushe. Ta sangha mena. Kani yomare kare kundalia tita che budil ti che ke peng marwa. Che tungge kwara, lamge kwara, che kyangyan li nyamnyo yonge kwara. Nangbe che di sabure, kachambure, pemese. Tindi tila metse kona kale kyab chinge mena ti chimma shishin shinya kabure. Tudu chi kibu chungu chungu jine kwa mashan kemendwa shida kwaya kemendwa. Bundido sabru dugdwa. Chena ko chizo la pagbe kindingi techik. Ti kyangyan tandalia. Lobchon chengechi mena. Shu ne tuye kawure. Shu nenga ngomadiya. Jiden kamla nubdu rao. Ti sonda. Tinde chane nganzu tsigur chigi wara. O ti chila gurmado kapsure. Kindi kunjo di sigi mindu sayati chena. Mandi di kindi kunjo nangla changma yo gore da. Kindi kunjo mena. Neo ko mare kura neba kura medite yukshana ku karusana sa karusana chechu na shichare. O dijilamnia.
So here, I think it's important to say that when we talk about the Sangha jewel, and generally we think of the Sangha jewel as being those who are Aryas, who are superiors, who have had a direct realization of emptiness, and often we think of them as being ordained, like maybe 10 or 12, a group of those who have ordination. And the reason that we think of this is because of the fact that those are individuals who have dedicated their life toward really practicing the Dharma, and they're thereby a good example for others who want to emulate that or who want to try to practice the Dharma. However, there are those who think that, well, of course, the Buddha is a jewel of refuge and the Dharma is a source of refuge. Like I have these scriptures and so forth, but I don't really need the Sangha, or I don't need to recognize the Sangha as a jewel of refuge, because here I have the Buddha, I have the one who has given these instructions, and I have the instructions themselves contained in various texts. But what is renowned within society as being the Sangha, maybe we feel like we don't have access to that, or we're not around, say, those who have ordination and so forth. And so one might think that you don't need the sort of jewel of the Sangha. However, it is the case that it's important to look to the Sangha jewel because, again, they are examples. They are someone who has a larger amount of virtue than we do. Maybe they're only a few minutes ahead, or they're sort of farther along on the path by some amount that allows us to then follow their example. And so when we think about going for refuge, it can't just be to the Buddha, who was the teacher, and the Dharma, who the various texts, scriptures, and realizations. But we need to have those who are practicing. We need to be surrounded by those kinds of examples in order to lead us in our own life, in order to show us how we go about practicing this. If we really don't have the Sangha to uphold the teachings, then the teachings, the Dharma, will subside. That will disappear. And so here, when it comes to the sort of recognition that, again, it isn't just the case that superiors are necessarily ordained Sangha, but it is the case that we need to have a group. We need to have those that are practicing alongside us in order to uphold the teachings of the Dharma and also give us that kind of inspiration and guidance. It's like if you have a very sick patient and the doctor gives them the medicine and then just says, oh, okay, here's your medicine, go on, and they don't give them any sort of support in the form of a nurse, it's very unlikely that they will get better, right? They go out and they don't know what they should eat, what they should do, and just being discharged like that is not sufficient. And so too, when it comes to our spiritual practice, we can't just have the teacher and the Dharma, but we need to have the Sangha as well.
Oh yeah, this one. What do you say? Oh, they do got sort of. 신행에 매지 때문에 대인지 교군조 성동에 디치리 cam도 신도 땜바다 대 랍자냐바 매버샤스 다 cam도 야부셔 그래서 뭐라 디치 cam도 신도 땜바고 그래서 cam도 가르치고 산제를 캡템 바보 이시 배 산제데 란도르 민네 탐제 말리고 켄겐게 켄발라나 메베 산제 다 연대 만부셔 도시셔 과마라 어 캡템 바보 나로나서 이시세 알로케 라 Mane te sombe chö te kya ngone de tere sha nga te chi yin se chö la kyab su chö su de nge te da de kibu chungu yin chungu ding na ding chimbu yin chimbu kab ji te da de san ji su ba na nga chi yin su go ra chö la kyab su chö kya ngone de tere sha te nge tu bi yin su go chö la kyab su kindu la kyab su chö su do de ten da tung ge kibu chungu da ding da chimbu lam la long ge shan da lo chu che shi ba te zo ya kon zo ya khami ya da che che 이러와 콘조다 냠도 제네 템바 셰셰 콘조 간데시기도 따네 대나싱아에 대치기 예시 긴들이야 겹주변 다트로스 이치베 코네니 겹순도고 야라 어디실라나
So here again, it continues in this verse saying the protection from such terror of not knowing where we will be born lies in the three jewels alone. And so we must make firm the practice of going for refuge and ensure that its precepts are never undermined. So we really need to have a stable practice of refuge, which really is based upon having a kind of confidence, a belief in the Buddha as a valid teacher, being able to place our trust in, have confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, recognizing that the Buddha has realized this directly and thereby unmistakably teaches what it is that we should and shouldn't do. And then placing our trust, having this firm practice of going for refuge in the Dharma is really saying, I will do this. I am going to take this up into practice. I am going to accomplish this, whether we're talking about the trainings for the being of small capacity or middling capacity or great capacity. It is that sense of I myself myself will accomplish these teachings, and thereby this will be a protection for me. And then looking to the Sangha again are like the exemplars. They are those that are practicing a similar path, and thereby we can look to them for guidance about how it is that we go about practicing. So here, that is the way in which we have a firm practice of going for refuge.
Oh, yeah. That Garland Gibson drew a use and ye chu can do some with the chas on. That's also Gibson Drogo in it, they come to do some good as also. Sanjelia, Roy Captain Bobo, Tesum, the Camune, Te Truven, the road, the trot, and the Martin, the Chichi, Sambaina. That Kuchikora, take a resina. Rani Casura, Quad and Yasungi to me, Cyril and Jishta Wachikora. Oh, Joshimang, only Kena, Yawamedusa. Father Milikena, Tunge do some. Tungele Tarduchikora, Rani Quad and Yasungi to me. Cyril and Jishta Wachikora, or Tilikena Yawamedusam. Tike Judy Kako, 정말 교대 깨를 때는 연구를 마도 교지 맨에 따라서 요 말에 현다지 강가트에서 요 말아 자꾸 라니 고아당에서 기통에 지리를 직시다 가지고 들에 탄듯이 거라 들에 교변되고 산제도 최다 긴두스부터는 두아섬 이시지 거라 들에 교변되고 군절을 요가 이치 봐서 어디 연안이 접수로 그러 Take mana coadangers to village Thabkhe met to Yanga, came somebody, and kept Dora Sigmara, or capture settlers, so Kangichi, Uni capture Gora, Millie Robertsi, the second, Kangichi, Uni Robertsi, Kangi the Masoni, Robertsi, Sigmara, or the Castle. Garland the Captain Dre, Captain Dre, Q, and Captain Love just started a Mambushera, or Tisumbre. Yeah. What in each of them?
So here, these are the objects of refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, those that we place our trust in. But to really have that kind of confidence and trust in the three jewels of refuge, we need the causes that lead us to having refuge. So here, this is really a kind of a fear, a trepidation over a birth in the lower realms, and a fear of samsara's suffering in general. And so it is the case, again, we won't have that kind of stable confidence in refuge in the three jewels unless we cultivate the causes. This is something that, again, everything is causally based, and thereby if those causes aren't complete, the result is not going to be complete. And so to have this kind of confidence in the three jewels, we need to first really have contemplated the sufferings of the lower realms and samsara in general, and a wish to get out of those. Having a fear of those kinds of sufferings leads us to a strong sense of wanting to get out of them. And then we need to have a confidence that the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, have the power to protect us from those sufferings. So it's really when we have a difficulty that we seek help, right? We seek help from someone when we're facing some sort of difficulty. And so too, in order to have refuge, and a real stable kind of refuge, you need to first have that fear of samsara in general and the sufferings of the lower realms, as well as a confidence that the three jewels have the ability to protect from those sufferings.
Oh, yeah, then the lapchat, the Tamambo, Mabusham, Timu Maybe lapchasera, or Tisha. Sanjay like Captain Roma do Tambutende to the social Chavura. Sanjay Chuk, Sunday, Pication Butcher Sungure, Tache, Samutan, Susu Samutan, and I would do some night, so depend on do something when I would do some night. Captain Rock. The man and Jimmy Captain Rogomara. I pay Captain Madonna, or dinner and love chat in the I would do some Sanjay Social love chat, I would do some. And that's how my Shash and Quadrero. Sanjay Chumde, they love just soon at the Chito Sule, Pena, some Sungi or Mado, and Agi Choto in the Chotini, Shanda Kapti Chasara, Shanda Shaman, Tranga Captain Demara, Sule Pena, Pembe to the Sungiora. Rara so Samuta, or Tambu Susuta, Kilodagam Kedam, the secretary of session to Suda, Lepata Langayaka Lawa Chay Christian West, or Sanjay Sachimbu, but there's some Kushep and the Kanga Lavna Shaguma Risungua. The Karas and the teaching is Susushira Pelgira, Susu Samutangirua, or Keranti Shanda Samutan Marangesa, Nashichi Shosana, and it Situ said in the Lagudu, but the Sars Mato Yomara. 소소 삼르다 내고내래 말에 간데레 삼르다 어디 다 쳐서네 접수도 되거라 어디 다 맞네 정말 접수 맞네 딜랍제라야 고에 가르도네 테술랑 신다 가고 뭐가네 되거라 팬에 되거라 어디도 가서 산제를 접수 소에 딱제 텐데제 딱제 제 차네 네 로사바 텐데이나 아니 신다야 캡틴 바보 원주라서 원직대베 하투치라서 tindelia nuba chimbu yore tindel capsun to go mare sungara chule capsu so in a simple sawa bango tanda simple sawa bande chambada ningjil shisun de nabichu de shisu yora chambada sawalia what in the chule capsu so in a simple sawa bango do kibu chungu ina migewa chu bango do simple sawa bango yora kibu duina chakdan yiri chakdan bango do 기부 친구인한테 소설레션다 강가 개셔 찍고도 어디에서 그 심지어 처와 방법에 취급이 가서다 결리 겹서 납자되래 근데라 겹서 소화시지 저야 나보다 몇점 바로 출루 현대시 요나야 기고랑게 셔번에 사바이나 신의 로주 신대이나 근데 신이야 고시다 하마고는 현대 망부 얘기되나 야 디퍼조되네 수저도 땡땡매 쳐그라 소사바이나 니도 전부이나다 강가를 따고라 강가 솔루션다 가르식도 티나니 소설랍젤리아 가르도 티디 가리나 지된 감이 기부 삼지메 캬부 마부 쇼르 티나니 랍제 가리네리아 마부 요라 어쩐데 로조 제쇼라 티나 시다 마싱게 사바이나 야 미카 케바지게 샨다 셰스노 디에멘도 산텐데도 메바샤라 자 kin둘레 캡스 소웨 대담 따와 미팅바 솔라 tim버멘도 과시 그 따외 전에 이뒤 전에 대단냠도 니부치에 매백해져리 뒤에 당부 로주시다라 고철을 맞춰 두줄 숨겨라 고철가 저까지 따와도 셰 고주페서 따고리 숨겨라 따니까도 따고라 강가 신단을 셔내셔라 야 어디서 안디사세
So, in addition to the causes of refuge, knowing the objects of refuge and the causes for that, there are then the precepts that one takes up, having gone for refuge. And there's much that could be said about those. However, the sort of common precepts of refuge are really beginning with our investigation. I mean, we first need to investigate and contemplate the merits of the three jewels, understand their good qualities, in order that we really gain a kind of confidence in them. And so the Buddha, for example, was a teacher who gave these teachings, this advice, not out of hoping to get many followers or out of a desire for fame, but really because they are beneficial to other sentient beings. But he didn't force anyone to take them up, as is famously said by the Buddha, in the way that you would sort of cut and burnish and rub gold in order to make sure that it's actually gold, to know that it's real. So too, you should examine my teachings and take them up from that examination, not just out of respect for me. And so he didn't teach with this need to have the most followers or to gain some kind of good reputation, but rather it is based upon thinking through the kinds of teachings that the Buddha gave, that we can gain confidence in him as a teacher, and recognizing that what he taught is for the benefit of others. It's not for some sort of self-enrichment, but rather the Buddha is putting that forth in order to benefit us, not in order to gain a lot of followers and so forth. And so the precept that we take up, having gone for refuge to the Buddha, having examined his teachings and really found that, oh, this person, this being has the ability to teach what will avoid the lower realms and what will get me out of samsara and so forth, is then to not go for refuge to other worldly gods, those that are sort of powerful beings like Brahma or Indra or Ishvara, whatever it might be, but to really accept that the Buddha is the sole source of refuge. And then the precept that we take up, having gone for refuge to the Dharma, is really abandoning harming other sentient beings, whether we are talking about the practice of the being of small scope, wherein you've given up the 10 non-virtues, you're not engaging in harm that way, or really when one moves to the being of middling scope, when you give up any kind of attachment and hatred based upon this grasping at a self. That too is getting out of harming other sentient beings, or whether it is the being of the great capacity that is really abandoning harming other sentient beings out of a love and compassion for them and trying to do good, trying to benefit them and even bring them to the state of Buddhahood. So having gone for refuge to the Dharma, the precept that one upholds is to not harm others. And now when it comes to the precept that one upholds in respect to the Sangha, this is to not associate with those who have discordant views, which is really mostly an instruction for those who are new. If you are new to this kind of practice and you associate with others who have very discordant views, who think very differently, this could influence someone who is just beginning on this path. Now, it is really the case that within this world, we have seen many inconceivable kind of incredible teachers that have come into the world. There are great scholars that have come. And it's not as though they don't have some sort of value to their teachings, but for someone who is new, who is newly getting into the practice of Dharma, it's important not to associate with those kinds of beings who would have discordant views that could then undermine one's own practice and certainty in the teachings. So those are the most basic kind of precepts that one upholds, having gone for refuge in a stable way.
Oh yeah, kadambe kishu sombo nashi. Parangbo samlata. Tanda ngazu tende tisamo kanga tusa mare sam. Nga meche lokache mato yo mare sam lokache tenge ne timato me yungya me re sam samgumara. Kyawa ne kyawa ko kyawa kyuche tenge erwa. Chidu tame bari te erwa muzu soye ke yo marwa. Chidu sa mi kyang sense kyang ringbo samlata. O chedele nge tende shang kyawa chima ti shima. Katu ine tisu changi yang sam yun ringbo samlata. Mi kyang sense ra. Lo kyaches o tili tanda ngay tili labdini tili lab kibi chungu ringi chenpo o ti samal ngay lab kingi sam rinbaashin du lab kingi sirwa kanga tanda namsa sambataga namsa lab thuk marwa o kyendi nga zo pechana lingu dwa chidangu ji tishe ki chanju sanje suga tangbu thuke dwa kine chanju sebe lab chala sokpala rim shindu lab ne sang keba res ngaya tina shi kale kya rim shindu lab ne ne Roani Sanje Koba Toba Chigi Samsa Samlokorwa. Chitango get Chanju to Nikiba, Chanju Sotida Rimshi Nebada. Tajan Rola Pento, the Chanju Semniki, Geshe, Chanju Sembella, Rimbashi to Labin Sedo, or in the Tiba Sem Kakin and it, Chigi Samsa Tachegura, or Tinde Samlitonera. And it Kibu Chunguta, Jinda, Shimbu Lamla, Rimgi, Labekone, and it Tatu Simjan Tamjigi, Dentutunge. Sangbucha, Ra, Tab than Shirab, Sangbucha, Tab, Shirab Gicha, Landor Gineshi, Shirab, Tab than Shirab Niga Tarsimbe, Sanje Chumde de Kovan Tobachene, Simjan Tamjeg to Tungachi Chigi, Tichi Duta, Sanje Cholia, Tabache, Sambache, Combe Rimji Juguinisam, Tichi to Chunigis and Kulu set them the Semper shoes. Oh, yeah.
So therefore, as the great Kadampa masters have said, we should think long term. We should set our sights really far into the future. And here, this isn't, just about having a long life. Maybe we only have a few years left in this life, who knows? But really thinking long term, thinking lifetime after lifetime, giving rise to this sort of attitude of commitment that I will train sequentially in the various stages of the path, beginning with the stages of the being of small scope and the being of middling scope and then the being of great scope. And I, just as all of the Buddhas of the past first generated this attitude of bodhicitta and then in stages trained in the various trainings, so I too will train in those various practices in order to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And so we need to make that kind of determination, that sort of conclusion for ourselves, that we will, thinking long term, thinking not just over the course of this life, but many lifetimes into the future, that we are going to commit ourselves to training in stages, to training in the various stages of practice of the beings of various capacities, to train in the method side, the side of goodness and kindness and warm-heartedness and so forth, to bring it to its culmination. And so too, to train in the method, the wisdom side, realizing emptiness and developing one's own wisdom, realizing emptiness. And it is through then listening to these teachings that we get these kinds of instructions about how we go about practicing those various stages of training. And so we should undertake listening to the Dharma with this kind of thought, with this long-term view, that I'm going to take what I hear and really implement it into my life. I'm going to, over the course of many lifetimes, continue to practice this for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so here, that's the kind of attitude, motivation that we should set for listening to the teachings.
Oh yeah, that just so like a shift in the imba.
Lare.
Oh, they thought that. Oh, they did. That the carison does na. That Shiba to change it. Me of your mother. Shiba to change it. Or Sashiba de love to us, Ming de Sungara. Sashiba to us, there's a Kare Jungaris, Yanda Yeshi Urjo cheers. Yanda, but Tombanila saw what ended Musum the Tobe. Jungish, Tamashi water the Shangura, Urjo cheers. Chanju Chodin Malibas. Chanju Chodin Maliba, Kebartoni Combeches, Chanjo Sudin Sejora. Jambanya Shabashi, Yanda Pomashi, Tsuduki Kambashi, Ombong, Tomo Chanju, and Pala and Geshe Yora, or Tezusugora. And then Chanjo Chodin Lanabebe Sayo Kovan Topsi, Chota Timbola, the Lam Telsuga, Chanjo Sudin, Lam Lasugora. Maliba, Kebartoni Combeches, or the Misegeni, Sa Shiba Virtue Casu, or the Congress. Then the Shiba Virtue change shower. Yanda be Yeshi Shiva Sasumbale Lagba. Tombani Tebe Yeshi Sigora. Sasumbale Lagba Nichungaras, Yeshi Shiva Jones, Tombani Tobe Yeshi Yanawa, Ya Tombani Tobe, Samble Tepe Shukchavangale Lagba. Anjungares, Yeshi Tombani Tobe de Urseva de Sudua. Urseva. Sasumbale she lagwa junchena, virtual she chas. And it Tambanyora, Shagwala Sogwa, Tesentu, Chanjo Sudin, Tesentuora, oh, Tesu Sama, Tesentu, Gitube, Chanju Chodin Maluba, Maluba Sudin, Kebartuni, Combaches, Osa, Shibeka Su Chanjo Sudin Dilia, Misegi, and Kebar to Papa Chuki Comgiore. Ne Tombani Tobe, choose Sasumbala Sobale, Hagba Ishiki, now said what all today younger days over that. What about the chicken?
So then, turning to the verse 447, which picks up with the fourth ground. Here it says, then the fourth is called the radiant, because the radiance of true wisdom arises, and bodhisattvas distinctly develop all the harmonies to awakening. So here, this fourth ground, it first gives its name, which is the radiant, and this is really due to the increase of this kind of radiance of wisdom realizing emptiness. This correct wisdom realizing emptiness gives off this kind of like light, this radiance. And it is really connected to their knowing all of the various points of the 37 harmonies to awakening, which come in 7 categories. So the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the 4 supreme strivings, the 4 bases of spiritual power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 awakening factors, and the eightfold path of the Aryas. So here it is the case that a bodhisattva on the 4th ground has a light of wisdom, this kind of light light or radiance of their wisdom realizing emptiness is superior to that, is greatly superior to that of the third ground, which was the luminous. And it is the case that they have a special kind of understanding or realization of these 37 harmonies to enlightenment, as encompassed in those 7 categories, that they meditate on them in a sort of special or distinctive way, meaning that they come to a greater understanding of those.
오야. 다 쉽주 쉽게 된 봐. 어디 가르쳐도서는 대 넘버 메베네스다 공발을 때는 편용해 줘라. 남미스는 제부심에 대해서 대 넘버 메베네 랍타 때네 라게 줘서 또 탑제해야 되는데 와라. 간대 추가 신주원지 탑제해서 라인에 되는데 와라. 뒤에 탑제게네 사이 깨보내서 어떤 데 줘그래서 그거 알려서 Rab Thabkhe Thabkhe ne ha ke yur ser sire do o di sire tan so di yo mi yo bra me da Rab Thabkhe ne la ke yur ser da o Thabkhe ke ne la ne de la di ke bu la sa de ju le sera ne jikso tawa Rab chung wa se jikso tawa Rab chung wa Kune jomje keba yense, jikso la tawa, keji ke jikbe rangshin che ki pumbu nali ya, rangwe tayo ba tawa, ya rangwe ne rangshin ki rang chengi ji tuba, rang ngoyo tuba, ming mambu yungwe ba, otozo ming tenda chikbe de ming kaka che mata. Jikso tawa rab chungwa, kune jomje keba yense, oti kune jombar cheba la keba juba yense, dan jeba de mazu lo sana ne, tu kire. 가르쳐 뒀으네. 대 넘버 member 나서 탑제 라 네베 하이 개부는 유로체 된디도 하이네 탑제 하이네 그 개부를 써봤는데 저기에서 직서 따와 랍중와 랭게게 튜바랑게 생이게 튜바집에 타와다 직소라 따와서도 직배 랑신신게 풍부해 나는 거라서 랑에 따 랑신게 랑게 뭐에 나가 랑게 유세 풍부 레라와 뜻이 델로 메꾸베서를 삼고도 랑윈에 요바스라 랑신게 요바 현다 풍부가라서 버튼 뒤니수 속발레 때는 두 메꾸게지 라 랑신게 요바 랑게 뭐에 요바 rāngi chengi ji yuwa, rāngwā tu yuwa. Tōchū tōngpa nyi di kakshā tili mīng māngbō yuwa rā, rāngwā tu mēba, rāngshī ki mēba, rāngu nē mēba, tōng tāmba mēba sāra, o tī sūngu wā rā. Rāngi chengi ji tūpar ji bē tāwā tāsa, phūngbō ngē nāli ya rāngu nē tūpē, rāngi chengi tūwa, rāngwā tu tūpē tā yuwa jimbā di kakshā tāwā tī rā, tāwā tāsa. Yā tī mēmba, Kansa Rangyawan Zibe, Kansa Rangyawe Rik, Rakwa, Kansa Rangyawe Rakwa Namse, Kansa Rangya Tube Savi Tuba Ziba Seshwara, Titi Rakwa Tereswara, Tanzilia, Tara Ramabuche Aywara, Tuptamo Shenda, Kansa Rangya Tube, Sesuma Tubala Tami Sershira. Tandi tanda oma tenkiyo lu chena kasa rangwene ma tuba, rangshinki ma tuba, rangchengi ma tuba, tandamba ma tuba, rangadu ma tuba, sewa tezo tuba zenke tila kasha zimba ma tuba te tongba nire te ara. Rangchengi ji tuba zimba te tawa re ese, kasha tawa zimba ara. Kasa rangyawar zimbe ragwa nam kune jombar chebala keba yenso, kasa rangwadu tuba zimba jomba ta. Kansa rangya tube, chayi du tuba zibe, kansa rangya tuba zibe, zimba jombala ya keba gyugde se. Rangya tube chayi su meba da, kansa rangune meba, tiniga tokbala keba gyugde se. Ti dokjo zimba te jombala keba gyugde se ndo. Yeah.
So then continuing into verse 4, 48, it reads, through the maturation of that ground, they become the celestial ruler in the abode of Suyana, or sometimes called free of strife, free of fighting. So they become the celestial ruler in the abode of Suyana, deities. They become skilled at destroying the source of the view that the transitory aggregates are inherently existent, I and mine. So here, there's sort of the ripening result of attaining this fourth ground is to be born as the kind of king of the gods in this abode that is, in the various cosmological schemes. Here, this is the Sanskrit name Suyana, or free of strife. And they observe these aggregates which are perishing moment to moment to moment, right? This transitory, the view of the transitory aggregates, they get rid of the kind of view that holds as though there is some sort of autonomously existent I, right? Either within those aggregates or somehow controlling those aggregates. So the kind of view of the perishable collection or the transitory collection as being an inherently existent I and mine is something that they are able to eliminate. Now here, looking at the commentary to this verse, it says that they become skilled in, knowledgeable or skilled in being able to destroy both the more subtle view, which grasps at an inherently established kind of an I, as well as holding to the more coarse view of the person as being a self-sufficient, substantially existent entity. So here, when it comes to the way in which we view these transitory aggregates and hold as though there is some sort of autonomous I or a self that exists inherently or objectively in a way that is not contingent or dependent upon its upon causality or upon conceptual designation, but rather it is, when we talk about the object of negation in terms of emptiness, particularly that subtle object of negation, there are many different synonyms. So we can talk about the self or the I as being like autonomously existent or inherently existent by means of its own characteristics, objectively existent from its own side, or ultimately existent, and that it is not any of the existent in any of those ways, is to realize the subtle selflessness of the person. And here, the subtle selflessness of the person, according to other philosophical schools, would be the person's lacking any sort of self-sufficient, substantially existent existence. And here, that's considered to be a more coarse form of that. But in this case, someone on the fourth ground then becomes skilled in being able to destroy all of these views of the transitory aggregates, whether that is the more coarse version or the more subtle.
Oh yeah, that is it. Oh, that goes to that. Kansa ranga chenji ji matuba se, rangwene matuba, rawatu matuba se, tongpa ni namju se tira. That is you are at that. Tanya ji wangi, pika yoyati pumbunga ti yuara. Sogbunal jene sangam chugam megam lungam tika ti yuara. Ene number shiva sim ji yuara. Lita sim ji se ura. Ligu chashe dewi karugura sangam chugam megam lungam namge kam tu se yungudwa. Sogbunal ya. Sa tabi chata chudan, chadang chusi dan roa. Ani zhedang. Ani lung udang eda. Namge kam tu se yungudwa tongsang kora. Naguna udang sa kora kobana tongsang kora. Oh, tetsu che, ani number sheba yora, mig number sheba na number sheba serapche. Ni tsora, yakundu, yakumendu, se tsoa dewa tunge tangyo yungura. Ani dushi, oh, dichi resha, ti mama resha spa, yora, simju mambu yora, tsoa dushi se, suji bumbu, tsoa bumbu, dushi bumbu, number sheba bumbu se, bumbu nga yora. Oh, tetsu la, teni, ni tangye be loy wangi se ora. Oh, di, kansa res, o di teshi re to ase, o di tentu re to ase re, ming da tanya pe loe wangi pa, ini tezule chokbala dakshi sewura yangla tozu re dakshi re dwara dasakshi nangba tongbale ke daya yo marwa nangba tongbale dichi res daksa yo ma chi gora lor chaya gora chaya de sobu da tozu chade gora soso ini mishinda tani sobu manchachi soso ini soso chowa da semda chiktin letyan pa tagira tozu dakshi sewura dasakshi mangbu tezula tene tanya sane dile kansa segreta sera yan de trashireta tendureta spada tanya je wange pa shane ani tegi pubunga bute ta tezu kange lega chede ta ga chawa cheba shage tende shindoba bese ta singistina ne chik munji che medoa ta diristina ne chik shaya yo mare ine tezule be ngo tade sene ngo sebuna shela ba yen ne shi yo mare tezule losu ta yo mare rồi nhưng cái số là tên này lời thanh nhẹ chỉ quan cái pa lời pa ta cái đó thế chăm là ta đấy lời quan cái sao quá tóc bé quan cái sao quá tóc bé ta sắm rồi tóc bé ta sắm tới nào đi nào thì anh chỉ đến chỉ thanh nhẹ chỉ quan cái hình gì sẽ càng cái đó sẽ cái này ba mình chỉ ta này xăm lúc ta này ô con chút là cái đó sẽ có được xăm thì thế mà muốn xóa được ba chilo ngô bữa xin ta đi lấy tiền rồi sẽ không bao giờ xóa di pumba se shas. Semi gezi odi kansa si teshi se shos le fa tagdo. O te cham ge kansa si sha hu re se gwara. Ma to raho nam ju ngazu so so samle na sambana shi ti yo ma re se gwara. Nam ju ngazu sam de nga se raho re sam tagdo. So nga ga ra yo sam sa te di ma do nga so bu da sem da so da sa da shu da tra da shu si te zu le fa 대신 내일 내가 또 섬으로 지금도 와. 근데 내가 라고 와. 내가 속고도 와서 근데 섬기도 마도 로서요 버리 섬기도 와. 저들 라와서도 라와도 와. 다시 때다라 때네 도저히 봐 딱고 섬을 샤고도 라와요 말에. 망불에 대신 내일 내내 다도 샤고도 대신 내 버리죠. 때네 딱 와. 저래야 되네. 뭐 강가 들 샤고라. 다시 강산들이 다 세든 니 와다 최탐제 담에서도 최랑랑 그 당이 될 거라 랑가 뭐들이야 분배 당이 강배 당이 속이 당이 속이 뭐야 됐으라 다음에 봤을 때 랑에 그 당이 와르다 랑에 당이 와 말했을 거라 최탐제 담에서도 강사 담에다 최제 담이 다 강사랑 그 당이 됐어라 대매버들 강사 담에서 거라 this is
So here, when we talk about this, the fact that phenomena are not sort of existent in this autonomous way, like when we have something like, say, the person, which is designated independence upon the aggregates, we have those various aggregates, right? But it isn't the case that anything within that basis of designation is the thing so designated, but rather we designate, conventionally speaking, like, oh, this is a person on the basis of the collection of the aggregates. But when we look within the aggregates, like the aggregate of form contains all kinds of different parts. It contains an aggregation of the four elements plus space, right? We need to be able to have space to breathe, and the human body is composed of various, solid parts, liquid parts. We have heat, we have breath and movement and so forth. And so we take those as the kind of basis of designation. There is the form aggregate, and then there is the aggregate of consciousness, all of our various sense and mental consciousnesses. We also have feelings, positive, negative, neutral feelings. We have the aggregate of discernment or discrimination, perception, which says, oh, this is this or this is that. We have the aggregate of volitional formations. And on that basis, on that collection of parts, we then designate, oh, that's Tashi, oh, that's Dundrup, oh, that's whoever it might be. And each of those parts are the sort of part of the basis of designation. In order to think I, or to have a thought of a person, something needs to arise within the mind. It isn't just without any arising whatsoever that we have that kind of thought of I or the person, but rather these are, again, when it comes to the person, there's this basis of designation that is comprised of various causes or sort of parts. And when we actually search for the thing that appears to us to have this kind of autonomous, independent existence, we can't actually find it. These phenomena are merely posited by the force of convention, by the force of designation. We can't identify something that is singularly that I or that self that exists in the way that it appears to us. It can't be something totally different and distinct like blue and yellow, nor is it any of the individual parts of the aggregates. But it is the case that this exists due to the conventions of the world. As we see taught in the Buddha's teachings in the sutras, that all of these things are merely dependently designated or are designated by conceptuality. There is no autonomous, independent I that exists in the way that it appears. Like we often have this feeling of, well, I exist in and of myself. I sort of set up myself or support myself in some way. Like I am the one that possesses this hand or possesses this consciousness and so forth. But yet it is the case that this I doesn't exist in the way that it appears to us as having that kind of autonomous, independent existence by means of its own characteristics, however it is that we give the sort of label to that. But rather it is the case that in dependence upon an aggregation of these various aggregates, we then designate, oh, this is an I, this is a person, and so forth. And all phenomena are selfless, both persons and other phenomena, in that they don't have, the Buddha has designated these two types of selflessness, of the person and of phenomena, in that none of these have this kind of autonomous existence, objective existence in and of themselves, but are all rather something that is merely dependently designated or designated through the force of convention.
Oh yeah, that is it. Oh yeah, that ko rawe tang yin nam jing ngan someday and I shim do rawa to rang ngo yo barch. Nga rang yo serach. Oh tindi some school do. Oh tindi o mares gora. Ani ta meres na me mares. Tene tak batam la ta sha wores. Dakshit to la tene le ba tak batam ya. Tenje never jo. Dakshila tenje tele tenje ne dokje ki pa tak ba. Te zam la ta sha wore. Ti indi ta sogul lega chene ta ga chawa chi yore. Sogul na cha chosu da nga na gi sta na gi yora. E tane choar ba chi kondu sa de no ta kondu sa de shas. Ro. Ta kondu chi gi do se. Ta kang ba ku je jon ro se ta du gu do. Ti sha ju de ma da. Ti le lo so ko to ge chi na lo ke yo ma de. Tanda nga zo mi ro wa. Mi indi ko mi pumbu la te ji de ni mi cha go ra. Ta ko ka sa le lu de ge sem ji te ji ma to de ni shi do de. Ni lu de ba sha je sem ko ra cha shi je ro sha ga ra. Ti de ko lu le te ji de go ma de yang ko ra pumbu so wa da te de te ji de ya ro sha ga ra. O ti ji la na de gi chi de.
So here, there's no sort of autonomously existent I in the way that it normally appears to us. The way that it normally appears, it doesn't exist in that way. But that doesn't mean that this I is totally non-existent, utterly non-existent, but rather the I is something that is existent through dependent designation. It is dependently designated on the collection of aggregates, and we can thereby say when the body is doing something, oh, I'm doing this thing. Or if the body is sick, we can say I'm sick. If we are going somewhere, we can say I am going. And so this is the way in which the I exists as something that is merely dependently designated upon this collection of the aggregates. And so here, when it comes to the way in which that is dependently designated, I mean, right now we are considered human because we have this basis of designation that fits the criteria of a human body. However, at the time of death, our mind, getting more and more subtle, will then travel to a new existence. And this too is something that happens through the process of dependent origination, through dependent designation. So here, this is how we should understand that these transitory aggregates don't exist as an autonomous or independent kind of an I.
뭐야? 다단데 간사 라와도 주변 점버들에 당지 참모시기도 다들 참모. 라와 뭐랑게 챙이지 매버들에 간사랑 챙이 매버들에 간사가 땅에 참모서고 알아. 어때네 시지 간사가 땅지 라바. 당지 땅에 라바. 스티 찍시기도. 티라와도 가시네. 라바도 가르시네. 간사랑 자와는 집에 Ragbanam Kunde Chombarchibe, Kansa Rangja Warjibe, Kansa Rangja Warjibe, Tangji Ragbare, Kansa Rangja Tuba Mevate, Tangmi Ragbare, Kansa Raone Mevate, Ragchin Meva Chibara, Ti Tambures, Tomata Ragani Shedwa, Kansa Rangja Waside, Sobo Songa La Temegora, Munzichi de Segura, Kansa Sunduza. Granzo kansa sundisa ko sogore chiltene pa kansa sundi kansa res teshi res la kwani ju teshi sa che ro ni kemlo ne ti sa che teshi sa che ro sobolia ti te ta kansa ko chargi ora kansa rangi suma se lo lia chare du sa tashi chi soboda jigoda la wakang sobechi charne ene ta de charo sha gora Mado Koran Kansa Koran Pumbu Soma Lamada Vishe, De Sobo de Komare, Se Shendaji Chaya Yomara. Tana she Toan Dushila Sobo Semge, Kondu Sade no Kondu Sade Shasana, Kondu Dakshi Chen, ending a Kondu Sade Sambira, Kunam Juden Dangil Otako Kondu Sade Savara. Dinduko Namju de Soma Lamaja, Neko Kondu Sange de Logache, Loso Munziche Yomara, what Telesira. Rangi Sunga, Chushen Sunga la Madebar Sundu Yabatella, Rangja Tubasira, Rangja Wajeba. Kora ya to Shenda Sunga la Munzichi, Log Sundusa, Chardusa, Karina Kambayana, Karina Shenda Chik Char, and Telepata Judemato, Ti Char de Kore, de Kamba Maris, Shenda Chilizusu Seke Yomara, Teleton all Kamban and Tell Sangazo. Ti kangba yabudu wa chachibu duwa si patagi duwa. O tende mato shige. Chasheji, kora mayingenge chasheji. Kora mayingenge chasheji, tuten ina tuyu mambushira. Kora mayingenge dakshiyam chasheji sunga la mato ne, ko kora taigar ngunzi chiya me batala, rangja matu wasa, kansa rangja tu mare. Mungarazu mindri chi tumre drone, lega chikata, ta ko rangja pirgi mare se reba. Rangja pirgi mare se. Kol Robachi Corese, Robachi Lieutenant, then Cochiana, Cocagan, Chetu Maris, Coranga to Maris, Cocontu Marisera, Ranga Pilgrim Maris, Bevenacena. Oh, did the day, Rapati Samage, Nambasangiba Mancha to them was Shandaga Heliguara. Tanda Ramando Matuba said, O Matenju Keshera, what didn't do.
So here in the commentary, it identifies that the more subtle grasping at these transitory aggregates is really grasping at them as being established by means of their own characteristics. And so the person not being established by means of its own characteristics, or not having that kind of objective establishment, this autonomous establishment, is identified as the subtle level of grasping at the transitory aggregates. So here there is then identified as well a more coarse version of that, and this is what is accepted by the lower kind of philosophical schools, this more coarse grasping at a sort of self-sufficient person. So here, when we think about grasping at that kind of self-sufficient and substantially existent person, when we hold to the I, it's as though in this case that they would think that there's something that can appear without or we could identify, say, an I that is not dependent upon one of the various sort of parts of its basis of designation appearing. So, for example, when we say like, oh, I am angry, it is on the basis of that mind of anger that we designate the I as being angry. It's not as though there is something independent and apart from that angry mind that we can use to designate, oh, I am angry. And so when we are thinking about the kind of like self-sufficiency, this is the I being able to appear independent or without depending upon any of those other parts appearing. Like in the way that we understand that really to have a thought of I, one or more of the aggregates needs to appear to us. We can't find anything, or we can't have the sort of appearance of the I without some other of the basis of designation appearing, something that we don't actually identify as being the I. So here, this really self-sufficiency has to do with the I being able to appear or be identified without relying or depending upon anything else. Like if we say, oh, that person is able to do the work by themselves, like he can do it self-sufficiently, he doesn't have to rely upon anyone else. Or like, oh, there's no way that he could do that by himself, he needs to have help from someone else. That's the kind of idea of self-sufficiency here. So when it comes to this kind of lack of an autonomous I, or an I that is existent by means of its own characteristics, that kind of language is exclusive to the Madhyamaka, the middle way prasangikas in particular, whereas this language of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person is something that is commonly negated by all of the lower tenant schools.
Oh yeah, that do debata chita mahota semtamba tozo kansa tamesite kansa rangya tube tameba tele kogara. Tanda nganja shete uma tenju tameba se ta chegara. Tini keba shegura ya what did it?
So then the Sutra school and the Vaibhashikas, as well as the mind-only school, when they assert the selflessness of the person, they assert it as being they're lacking any kind of self-sufficient, substantially existent entity. Whereas when we talk about the kind of selflessness of the person, they're lacking any sort of autonomous or independent objective existence, that is the Madhyamaka view.
Oh yeah, tanga soluka shibchu shikudira. Ngaba shindu changa tu sigdwa. Sangaba dele shindu changa sigdwa. Oh, tini ti karchigresne. Tu kunji shindu tupgeche. Tu laipi tula sokwa tizogene. Shindu tupgaware, kyunchi tupgumare sigwara. Tupgeche. Shindu changa wasa. Ngaba dira, sangaba shindu changa watele ya. Laipi tula sokwa tizoge. Ene tuye kaleka kyunchi tupgumare sigwara. Kunji shindu tupgeche. Ene gasuna. Pakbe tenso. Chawe ten. Shela keba juwe so pakwe tempa shela soba tongpanjila soba tamil soba chara kanga di shepaliya ni keba juwe de se o chiri tati ma deba chichi lo shane di meta ngaba shindu changa wa sikdwa shindu changa wa ne jitengi kam tamje na nebe sai bu tu tamje ki jas jitengi kam ne yako kende parshe chinge sai bu tu yora sai ingengi tu ki riktende chuda tindel mekange o tindepa izule chutu wal pashe sengete sa 아니 가르치도스나 나바 장가와사 나바 장가와세 장가와니 지대게 감탐제나 네베 라이프 두 탐제게자 판바르지면이나 들려 괜찮제 두기더니 괜찮 두고요 말해서 판바르지 두고요 말해서 아니 때 까냐 때 라이프 두 쪼도 저게 라케 말해서 괜찮 두고 말해서도 네때 코르만 보여 거라 둘에 양거라 둘 코르 현대 같은 데 어떻게 저게 telejaki so diga never get to mane kortuzo kaba never get to it never get to mares wara te kanyes de kanyenge otar tani bachi chi mama chi spa dos never kesna do dege warba o tuzo lembu so da tuzo never get to mares wara te kanye be tenla so yobo se shebji shongera so ba tamme ba 한번 세토 말세 뒤끈지 신도 툭가에 서서 상하바 내가 됐어라 내뒤 정말 탐지 라이브 뒤 섬지 거라 툭가와래 거라 개그 말세 괜시토 말세 거라 툭가에 실 내가 신도 장가와서 제 사들에 신도 장가와서 들에서 뒤 남지 투바가와서 장가와서 그래 패시트데 연대들 장에 되고 연대 세르부터 친구 내산에다 뒤에 툭툭 말해서 했던다 있어라. 박배 땜바시 타라서다. 또 박배 땜바시 타라도가 단단 장밀 타라셔서 어디내시 랑자에 가사도 집에 집어되게 내서 아니 근데 하나 좀 코야 되셔야 와라. 동해 땜바 군주 땜바 거기다 대다 태운 거 대시. 야 가서 라오에 당기도 두 번째 집에 군대라니 초에 군주 동해 땜바 군주 땜바 거기다 남대셔요라. 타라로 셔야 용도 아까시네. 어디서 뭐야. 박외 땜바 타라서 다서 도데 사주발에 텔레로서 숨베 땜바 니세. 야 땜바 시스 멤버제 텔레로서 땜바 니게 남샤송바. 사주벤 되고서 땜바 니게 남샤송. 군주 땜바다 전담 땜바 세더라. 땜바 니게 니라서 배 타외테 셰발라 케바 중오스. 군주 땜바다 전담 땜바다 아니 땜바 실로서 봐도 타와다라고 상마탐제데 셰발라 케바 주고데 있어. 야. 뭔데
So then turning next to the fifth ground in verse 449, it reads, "The fifth is the indomitable. Since one cannot be subdued by any demons, one gains expertise in knowing the subtle meaning of the Arya's truths and such." And so here it is the case that when one reaches this ground, the fifth ground, one is really impervious to harm by any kind of demonic forces, the sort of sons of the gods, or these various beings who would try to create interference, particularly out of their dislike for those who practice the Dharma. So those who would seek to create any kind of obstacles or any sort of troubles, faults for those who are practicing the Dharma at this stage, one is impervious to those harms. And so it says here in the commentary that because in all of the sort of worldly realms, it is the case that these practitioners cannot be defeated by the sort of son of the deity, that particular type of Mara. So those main kinds of negative forces or Maras, then how much more so are they impervious to harm by those who just listen to those speeches? So the sort of retinue, if it is the case that the main deity or main demon can't really create any sort of harm or fault for a Dharma practitioner, then those who are sort of their servants or acting on their behalf, who listen to their speech, their entourage, it's much less even likely to create an obstacle or able to create such an obstacle. And so this is really where it gets the name then indomitable, that they are unable to be dominated or overcome by any of those kinds of forces. And here, their qualities have reached such a level. Really, it has to do with their qualities having reached such a level that they are then impervious to that sort of harm. And so here it explains that they have this kind of knowledge of the subtle and coarse Four Noble Truths. And in the Dashikabhumi Sutra, the Sutra of the 10 Grounds, it explains that alternatively that they have a knowledge of the subtle points, all of the subtle points of knowledge with respect to the two truths. So whether it is the presentation of the Four Noble Truths, of knowing all the various subtleties of how it is in this sort of more coarse form, how grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent self would then lead to the kind of experience of the truth of suffering and so forth, and how one would reverse that, as well as the more kind of subtle level of grasping at an autonomously existent kind of a self and how that would lead into samsara and so forth, and how to reverse that. They have that knowledge of the coarse and subtle Four Noble Truths, as well as is explained in the 10 Grounds Sutra, that they have knowledge of all of the subtle points of knowledge with respect to the two truths.
Oh, yeah, that's no, that that number me bene se olam kumbala ten debusigora. Kandene laje use, kandese, sugar shandu just in the ora, kandegi lay any cable sobat in the jurgades. Kandene laje jur, mudi cheba tamjeki, nyomo, tane doche boss. Mudi chela sobat is a tamjeki, nyomo ba, tawe ne to tawa matiba to, movie ne to the metin better, dogger chetu would esiguara. The number may be contagious, lam compal ten debu. The number may be contagious, nature, like every jurose. Say, say, debuni, chinagi mudi, cheba tamja or debu shaya, chidanagi mudi chela sobara, mudi cheba tamjake, yumubata, tawene. Nam dogwar cheba, o teleria mixek in the way in the chaga resungora. You in the workers, Yamu, Tanya dog cheba, o say. Mudi cheba, tamjeke, Yamu, Ura, Yamumba, Chingege, Tawang and Benet to the dogwar chega. Oh, yeah, what is it? There's a thing, High cabulas of what in the journey, and the church at that integrity you were. Nimelo Sechevina. Oh, the womb you mabuchene, and it is only. Tatochi Cheshire Soba Tindriti Yongora. Mother Kebuchene, Benjota Pusum Soba, the Tindrician, they drive a Keshe Omara. What is that?
So then, continuing with the ripening results that come in verse 450, it says, through the maturation of that ground, they become the celestial ruler of Tushita. They refute all the Tirthika's beliefs concerning the efficacy of austerities. So here, the kind of ripening result that comes from obtaining this fifth ground is that they are born as like the king of gods in Ganden or Tushita. That's the ripening result. And another of the ripening results that they obtain is to be able to reverse all views and afflictions of all Tirthikas or non-Buddhists. And so here, becoming a king is not in order to like engage in self-enrichment, right? Or to be able to get quite wealthy, but by being the king, being in that kind of position of authority and taking care of people, they are able to teach the Dharma to a wide number of people, to a vast number of people, and benefit them in that way. That's the reason that they take or have this kind of ripening result of becoming a king.
Yeah, damn it. Oh, yeah, Tana did that. Sholuga. Nothing much either. Tubangon jo she chate sa tubangon de chokwa se te se do. Sanje cholangon chochi, sanje chotobangon de chokwa se. Shine ladon komba yi, gogba tobe kebe se. Shine da ladon niga gutone ni, gogba tongba ni toba, tongba ni komba ya. Ini gogba tobe kebe se sa. Lade dreba malo sa de. Sa tubangon de chokwa se gre se, sa tubangon de mende ngondo chokwa. Ngondo chokwa, nyamsha semde se. Sa tubangon ngondo chokwa se chate. Sanje Geshe tenje Debre Jung, Sunyedan Dawa, Tatumba is Tenji Debre Jung, Sunyedan Dawa, Sunyedan Dawa, Long the Chok Witches, Tenji Debre Jung, Sunyedan Dawa, Loa, O Sakoma de Tomalia, one the Chok Witches, one the Chok Witches. Chetan, Shu Yanda what Dubale, Sim Yambar Shana Yandawa, Chitawa Shindu Shepherd Jurista, Tonbanila Stitch to Yambar Shani, and it Chechiba Kwani Shetu Lisa. She Sumbatar, Sangabar, some danger, Sangabek some day person in Yamlichel over the Esember. Sangaba some danger, person Soba Tate of the shit of the person at Sobe, Chanju Semba, Chanju Sembe, Timu Maimbe, Shineta, Ladon Combas, start to wake up Sigara, shit up the Sapat over Ese. Some danger person. Pajite Tulaten is any caress, Tulaten and Dona, Tombani, Yudin Bipardo, Sumdo, Yambar, Shanebe, Gobato Bekebeses, and Gobas in the Tombani Shadura, Tombani Liane, Gobato Bate, Lotus into Caber, you research, yeah, division.
So here then turning to verse 451. This then is the sixth ground, and it says the sixth is called the approaching because they approach the qualities of a Buddha and are enhanced by the attainment of cessation through uniting insight and serenity. So it is the case that on this sixth ground, through this union of insight and serenity, they are approaching, they are getting closer to the qualities of a Buddha. And here they sort of move in the direction of or approach this sort of understanding of the Buddha Dharma, that all of these dependently originated phenomena are like reflections. They understand them to be in that way. And so they are able to, as it is explained in the Compendium of Pure Dharma, that even when they are placing the mind in equipoise, knowing, they are able to know sort of phenomena correctly. So here it is the case that through the power of particularly surpassing practice of meditative concentration on the fifth ground, that here then on the sixth ground, they gain the ability, a special ability in wisdom, which in turn gives them this kind of power that comes through the uniting of method and wisdom, or insight and serenity, and thereby they are able to remain in this kind of meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness for a very long time, and they attain this kind of cessation wherein they can remain in that sort of single-pointed focus, that meditative concentration, directly realizing emptiness, should they desire to, for an extremely long period of time.
Oh, yeah. Tanga Chungani Tiba. The number may be nice or the Recombal, the Debuka Ringurishina, Saye Cabo, Reptu Durse. Oh, Numo Namjim Mesowa, Sagbang Aje Chansi Chisa, or that Carsidosana. The number may be Reptu and the Kathleen Sugar Shendu wants set in the Oratina and the Sugar set is high. Wombu like you could is, or the number may be Rapture, number me bene, Chuke, Fly one but cure. The number me bene, Fly cable, like a would have 2 set and I said, Niede Namje, Metropada, having a Geshe Shiba also. Niede Namje, Siki Nemetuba, or having a Geshe. Hakbardung a Geshe, so I guess you are so about to do it to this. Yeah, do much.
So then, through the maturation of that ground, this is in 452, they become Lord of the Celestials who delight in emanations. So again, in this sort of cosmological scheme, they become the Lord of Celestials who delight in emanations, unsurpassable by the hearers. He or she illuminates arrogant pride. So here they are then, by the power of the ripening result of obtaining the sixth ground, able to become like the sort of master, the highest of celestials, the Lord of Celestials of this land of delighting in emanation. They are no longer able to be outshone in any way by hearers or solitary realizers, and thereby as well, they also pacify any kind of arrogant pride.
Yeah, what it is. That the next look, what you have some data. Oh, the next Saturn Butty shade. Timber Rindo song at the Saturn Butty made the Rindo song, Saturn Button. Tani Rindo song dance Sirisa. Rindo song at them Bessina, Rindo songs. Kanjir Kechi la, Terne, Gola, number juice. Kechi Chigliaco, Tongbanyla, number Shabata, Town Niga Chetu. Oh, teacher, didn't ever curse. Timber, Satimber, Rindo song at the essay. Take ever Tommy Banita. Sawamanamle, Yundaji Tani, Rindo song, Sawamale, Yundaji Tani, the Tarim book on the Lapa, Rindo song, Rindo song at Dembecere, Sakeba, Tan Neve Juime, Sakeba, Satimber left the Sakeba, Tanya, Sakeba, and in your Motama, Bangugara. Oh, Rindo song, I say, also. To go my Mangela Betarin do ya and then have a content to us. The Sakeba Tanya Soda, Rindo song, Chili Tanya. Satuba Mangele, Rindo song, Kangachina, Keji, Rela, Tene, or Satuba Mangete, Satumba Sora, Considusina. Satuba Mangele, Rindo song, Kangachina, Satuba Mangelia, and Keji Late, Keji Rela, Tene, Gobala number Juk, Gobala number Juba Neves or so, what is Saturday constituted number Juba New as a woman of so Nigma Resore. Cusenting Geshe Nedda Ra, Sanjan Namjulo, Toki, Sikin Nunamana, or Satumbanane, near Rada Rasanget, Loy Toki, Sikin Nunamure. Chitan de Jaba Mamuyora, Nendo the Ranje Papa to the Omatenjo Lucene, Tony Tamutoviora, Tongbanyel Tara Yomare, Tongbany Dada Toviora. Oh, Jason Daco, Nierande, Loycone, Sigin Tugumarese, Thabkhe, Sigin Grace, Chanju Sam Gichania, Sasanes, Sigin Tugra, in a Shirab Gichane, Sigin Tugumarese, to Sardine Tombanyelia. 요즘 중도지 돌아 동반이는 주당이가 제네바티 톱스나니 세긴도 그래서라 다들 그 동반이 무슨도 또 저도 냠바 셔도 자니 파 남산 군주 위도 제대 가고 있어라 지단도 그 똑바게 주당이가 돼서 오마도 반에 여기 와라 이나데 동반이 무슨도 또네 주당이가 저거 제대 가고 있어라 티 겨른 겨르도니 동군주다 더다 베치탐제 뒤치도 시네니 상게도 요라 어 뒤산에 되셔도요. 그러면도 야.
So then turning to 453, it says the seventh is far advanced because the number of excellent qualities has advanced far, since on this ground they enter moment by moment into the equipoise of cessation. So here the name of this ground is gone afar or far advanced because it is the case that they have advanced far in terms of the kinds of qualities that they have. So here it says that during this sort of second immeasurable eon of gathering merit, they have far surpassed or far advanced beyond the kinds of qualities of those on the lower grounds. And in particular, they are getting close to the eighth ground, right? They have come close to the eighth ground. And so too, they have this ability that is not available on the sixth ground and below, to within the span of a moment, within moment to moment, they can enter into and exit this kind of equipoise cessation, this cessation of equipoise. So here, when it comes to that ability to enter into and come out of the kind of direct realization of emptiness, even within the span of just a moment, they are thereby superior to those hearers and solitary realizers in terms of the power of their mind. They outshine them in terms of the power of their mind. Now, in general, there's much debate about the sort of superiority of bodhisattvas to hearers and solitary realizers. Now, while some schools assert that they realize different emptinesses and thereby the kind of realization of a bodhisattva is superior to that of a hearer or solitary realizer, for the prasangikas, they would say that both hearers and solitary realizers as well as bodhisattvas realize the same emptiness. And so what is, rather than being superior just in terms of the method side here, though, having this ability to, within the span of just a moment, enter into and come out of the kind of direct realization of emptiness into that ultimate, like seeing the ultimate and then seeing conventional phenomena. Now, for us, this is quite difficult. We can't, only a Buddha, right, can simultaneously realize both the conventional and the ultimate. But here they're getting sort of closer to that in the sense that they can quickly, very quickly enter into that kind of cessation and come out of that and realize conventionalities, which in this way makes them, by their mind, not just the method side, superior to those hearers and solitary realizers.
No dimeto. This one, solo
Jigsaw.
Da did da, Nabjunga, did it.
Ngashi,
Nabjunga, she did a did what?
ngapsunga shi marbe. De number mimbe nas.
The number Mimbene, one guru, fly it up with your chair. Pagbe Temba, Natobe, Love Chucho Chamber Cursa, yeah, Dimbacher. Take I say those, the number Mimbenes and Debucarus and Dabala one cure, and then tie it up with your side. The wagon, the wagon. Pagbe Temba, number Tobe, she bes, Pagbe Temba soba, she number Tobe, number Toba, she be, Love Pagbe, two. 추조심보 법에 땜벌어서 왔는데 또 배안에 도시 배 추조 개발 지시다 어쩐데 그렇게 돼서 야 안에 들어나 그래서
So then in verse 454, it says, through the maturation of that ground, they become the powerful ruler of the celestials. They become a great leader of the jnana acharyas, knowing the realization of the aryas four truths. So here, then they become, again, a powerful sort of leader of a lord of the land, those who have dominion over the the desire realm and so forth. So through the maturation of that ground, they become a powerful ruler of the celestials. And then as well, they become someone that's like a quite a great leader in terms of knowing or realizing manifestly the four truths of an Arya and so forth. They become a great leader of the Jnana Acharyas, knowing the realizations of the Arya's four truths.
어다들 다 솔로가 없중 나가더라 왜 뭐래 어다 전에 뒤서
Mm.
나 언제 샤샤나 누구예요 누구시야 누구예요 매니저
So, given the hour, we will stop there for today.
누구시 소리라면서 야 당업중 나가더라
And we'll pick up then with 455 next time.
Thank you, Garland, for these
Merci,
beautiful
merci,
teachings
Buddha.
and the beautiful motivation, inspiring motivation. And thank you again, Katrina, for a beautiful interpretation of Geshe's teaching.
업중 없이 드시네로 업중 성보도 줘서
나를
뭐야
납시 사성
업중 없이
나중앙안에 고추기를
업중 없이 살아와
No,
야 이거지 던지
just making sure we get the text marked at the right place for next time.
Okay. And just a reminder for people online, Geshe is going to be here at Sravasi Abbey October 23 through 30, teaching Gen Rinpoche's prayer to be reborn in the land of bliss. And Katrina is also going to be here. We're so delighted. And if you would like to support the airfare of these precious teachers coming to the Abbey, you can find the donate button on our webpage and let us know how you'd like to designate your donation in that way. Okay, so we'll finish with some dedications.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on a sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the Venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratnamadalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
진짜 제만제용 게.
뭐야 같이 줘 뭐야
Recording stopped.